G'day, friends and fans. Welcome to Writing Corner 45. Faction Building Part 4, Conflicts and Rivals. No organization can exist without a conflict, a rival, a goal, without a meaning. Conflicts do not have anything to stand for or against. This undoubtedly brings conflict, events. It will bring opposing groups into conflict. So, when you create a faction where they're rivals, what separates the faction from those inside and outside? What are the challenges or obstacles that prevent the faction from achieving its goals? How does the goals bring this faction into conflict with others? What is the relationships this faction has with outsiders and other factions other than its rivals? How does it deal with its rivals? How does it resolve its problems? Undoubtedly, there's no story without conflict. There's no history without conflict. There's no events. There's no story without a story to tell. If the faction does not play a significant role in the story, then you're going to not worry about it. But if this is a significant faction, it needs conflict. Otherwise, what is it? Well, what is its contribution to the story? And if it's, I suppose, you look at it from comedy and tragedy point of view. If it's a comedy, the conflict is farcical, or they somehow, farcical, tragic. Everything they try fails. So, rivals. What is the rivalry to truth? Flat Earth? Contrarians? Conspiracists? I'm not talking about people who come up with conspiracy theory. I mean those who actually engage in conspiracies. Marxist, Muslims, and other factions. Whether you like it or not, they all engage in conspiracies. They all conspire against their rivals. They all openly admit they lie, and they constantly lie. And then they gaslight you by saying they're about truth and peace. When, but those aren't the only ones. Those are more simplistic, but the larger the faction gets, the more simplistic it gets. You can't unite billions of people without a thing on a complex idea. You'll just get too many arguments. So the larger the group, the more simple the idea. But on the pyramid of ideas, eventually, the ideas, the higher you get, or the higher the concepts, the higher you get, the narrower it gets. But eventually, all groups based on conflict or rivalry will eventually demise. So keep that in mind, that these conflicts will bring about somebody's demise. Groups always rise and fall. They always change. There is no constant other than change. The further you get away from a group's founding, The further the ideas spread, the more simplistic the ideas become, the more watered down they become, the more conflict, the more rivalry. Groups will split, factions will form. That's what you have, factions in conflict with itself. To form new groups, new factions, and eventually those conflicts will be inward. And if you go over the various other, if you go over, like you look at the organizational structure, of course, you have, you go through the organizational structure, you identify rivalries within the conflict. I mean, rivalries and conflict within the structure. Like, do the lower members rebel, disobey? Is there rivalry between branches of the faction that will ultimately result in? And how do these different? How does this faction see these rivalries and conflict suit the faction's goals and motivations, and the ideas that bind them? Do they cause conflict? Are the rivalries about interpretations? Remember, you have an organization, but within organizations and nations, you have factions. So you have an organization, but an organization itself is merely a faction of a nation. Every organization is a faction, and within that organization is factions. So the bigger the organization, it's going to be very pyramidal, with the bottom believing it's a membership of a church, but in fact, it's a church of this city. It's under this, it was founded by this faction, this branch, this organizational structure. And you'll get it within practice. You'll have variations in practice, the use of language, the use of the format of meetings or worship, or practice. Like, unions will try to standardize, like, they are pretty religious. Every organization is religious, whether they want to admit it or not. Religions are the origin of factions, conflict, and rivalries. So it all comes down to creating a belief structure which holds the faction together, and then looking for the cracks. And these cracks give you your story, give you to build on, giving the factions purpose and meaning, and ultimately you'll be giving life, dimension, depth, or whatever you want to call it, character to your faction. And that faction's branches will have their own flavor. Thank you for listening. Please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. Check out the links in the description below. But of course, to start off, like, share, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And if you'd like to support the channel, buy coffee mugs and other items. They're made in America, original art. And if you'd like to become a patron, you can support the channel and my writing, all my RPG material. All links in the description below, including my writing and where you can buy my books. They're in audiobook, paperback, and audiobook. Thank you. I appreciate each and every one of you, and see you in the next